Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 3, Episode 46, the final episode of this season, the final episode of this year, the year of our Lord 2023, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. As promised, I am going to have a segment on the Los Angeles Dodgers and their domination of the free agent market in Major League Baseball. I am also going to speak to the Phoenix Suns and Newcastle United, both teams that are ravaged by injuries and both teams that are now being exposed, as teams will be when those injuries begin to reflect on their record. And finally, reflections on Fargo Season 5, Episode 7. Thank you to all of the people who have listened to this podcast over the course of the last year, who's listened to this podcast for the last few years. I really do appreciate you. If you're new, please like, subscribe, please thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to people far and wide. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the podcast. I'm trying to roll out a number of things for next year, putting some of the transcripts of the podcast into writing to have a blog presence, putting clips out on YouTube and Instagram as shorts. I'm going to delve into the world of artificial intelligence to see if some of this stuff can't be accomplished for relatively little money with high level, with great proficiency. Here's to the dawn of the next evolution of the podcast in the year of our Lord, 2024. Happy New Year to you all.
Act 1, a brief commentary on the Los Angeles Dodgers.
For the many of you that know me personally and listen to this podcast, this is not going to be a profanity-laced tirade, although I'd like to give into my ego and have it be as much. It simply doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to do so. The Los Angeles Dodgers have cornered the market on coveted free agents because of their massive payroll, their ability to finance what is a payroll tax, if you will, which is the system in Major League Baseball. They don't have a salary cap. They just tax you if you go over a certain amount of money in players' contracts every year. And the Los Angeles Dodgers are willing to go over that amount, and they're willing to pay the tax because they have the money to do so. In preparation for this piece, I actually did some research. Yes, I know. It's a big deal. It's a big deal on the podcast. I actually did the research in anticipation of this piece. Okay, enough of that. Here are a list of free agent signings that the Los Angeles Dodgers have made, I believe, in the last 2 years. So this is only 24 months. Now, it could be longer. I didn't actually look when all of these contracts were signed, so it may be longer. It may be 3 years. Can you believe it? 3 years. Blake Snell, 7 years, $200 million. Matt Chapman, 6 years, $150 million. Cody Bellinger, 8 years, $250 million. Josh Hader, 6 years, $110 million. Jordan Montgomery, 6 years, $150 million. Marcus Stroman, a former New York Metropolitan, 3 years, $32 million. Tio Hernandez, 4 years, $80 million. Rhys Hoskins, 1 year, $17 million. Jorge Soler, 3 years, $45 million. JD Martinez, 2 years, $40 million. Shota Imanga, 5 years, $85 million. Lucas Giolito, 2 years, $44 million. And throw in a 12-year contract with Yoshinobu Yamamoto, 12 years, $350 million. I had that all written out, and then I had a script that I had thought about, and I was going to come on here, and it was going to be somewhat funny and tongue-in-cheek, but mostly acerbic, mostly pretty judgmental, the way the Dodgers have covetously and greedily swallowed up practically every free agent. And then I realized that this is no different than what the New York Metropolitans aspire to do. This is the model, the game plan for the New York Mets in the next 5 to 10 years. It's very likely a game plan that will be employed by other teams, but for the fact that they don't have the funds in order to compete in such a market. And they're not willing, even if they do have the funds. I'm looking at you, San Diego Padres. I'm looking at you, New York Yankees. Even if they do have the funds, they're not willing to incur that massive tax for the payroll that is required to secure so many free agents, so many marquee free agents. Now, I could go into the fact that a lot of this money is deferred, the way that these contracts are structured. The money's deferred, which means that you're just kicking the can down the road as a baseball team. You're going to be in luxury tax hell here in the next 5 years. The Dodgers have shown a willingness not only to accept that purgatory, they've shown the ability to get in and out of it, to make key trades at key times, to let certain free agents go. They seem to be pretty comfortable navigating the way the luxury tax works. And even though they're going to be hit very hard, they're not worried about it. As an exclamation point to this very segment, the New York Metropolitans this past year, who were terrible, ended up paying the largest sum in luxury tax in the history of baseball, $110 million. So the Dodgers, having gone out and spent money like a drunken sailor on shore leave during the First or Second World War, they still paid less in luxury tax than the New York Mets did. The Mets want to be where the Dodgers are at right now. They want to have a farm system that's still going to provide them great talent that they're going to have to eventually secure. They also want the ability to be able to let that great talent go because they have, and this is key, the financial wherewithal to go out and secure free agents in the market, thereby providing them the maximum amount of flexibility. It's really only a matter of time before we have an arms race in Major League Baseball between a select few teams. There may be additional ownership groups that come into the league that are willing to spend money like this and incur what we will call the repercussion of such high luxury taxes. It's not a fair playing field, and it's not one that I look forward to, even as a New York Metropolitan baseball fan who knows that we're going to be competing in this elite, this exclusive club of teams that are going to be able to corner the market on free agents. There's a great line in the movie The Color of Money with Paul Newman and Tom Cruise. Paul Newman is in the Cadillac. He's passionately articulating his vision, his belief system, the core of his ethos when it comes to gambling, that money won is so much sweeter than money earned, and he had forgotten that for a long period of his life. Go out and watch the movie The Hustler to find out how he gets to the point in his life where he is hustling with a young Tom Cruise, pool sharking across America. Well, that's how I feel about my sports teams growing organically through a draft, cultivating their own players, and winning it all, being as successful as all of these store-bought teams. And that's just not the way the New York Metropolitans, at least up until now, have built their baseball team. It's the reason why I was so passionate about the Arizona Diamondbacks, the way that they built from within and cultivated these players that all came up through the minors, right? AA, AAA, and into the bigs, and they've signed them to long-term deals. Knowing that and experiencing that is twice as sweet as having gone out and bought all these free agents. Yet when that next free agent comes on the market is for sale, what do I want? I want the New York Mets to go out and buy them. I want them to be able to outbid any other team to retain their services. It's like an alcoholic that can't help but want that next drink, and then in the moment they take a sip, before they've even had the high come over them, they're in this state of regret, of shame even, because they know long term this is not in their best interest. Long term, it is not in the best interest of baseball that you have a team like the Dodgers doing what they're doing, competing with a team perhaps like the Yankees and now the Mets and maybe two other baseball teams, if even that many, willing to go out and spend this kind of money. It is very bad for the competitive balance in baseball, and it's very likely going to hurt not only new fan allegiance, even old fan allegiances like mine. Will it feel good to have a $300 million payroll and win a World Series? Yes, it will. Will it feel as good as having a $195 million payroll, having brought up a bunch of players through your own ranks, your own minor leagues, and having have won with those types of players, that type of organization? Of course not. That's the sweetest way to win. And in modern day sports, that is going the way of the dodo.
Act 2 Reflections on Fargo Season 5, Episode 7.
Quite a lot to dissect in Season 5, Episode 7 of Fargo. Although I don't do it very often, I think the easiest way to go about dissecting all of the different thoughts, the themes that were present, the subject matter that was addressed, some of the references to Fargo the movie that I noticed in this episode. I really like doing this, making all of these notes and then publishing them on the podcast. I haven't invited my broad, my vast, my sweeping throngs of listeners to point out the references that they notice in these episodes. And I need to be better about doing things like that in order to try to generate some activity surrounding these episodes. If you have any of these references, they're on the tip of your tongue, they're top of mind. I'd love to hear them if they're references that I missed. I'm not going to shy away from some of the heavier subject matter and the way that it was positioned in the episode. And I'm not going to shy away from some of I had to think. I actually had to pause there and think for a second, some of my criticisms. Yes, I have criticisms in this episode. I am not a fan of the dream sequence, spoiler alert, although my reflection pieces have all been spoiler alerts. Not a huge fan of dream sequences. Rarely are they pulled off well. I believe that the dream sequence in this episode was necessary. I'm going to go into all of that. So let's just jump right in. Let's open the episode as it opens with one of my favorite characters of the season to further illustrate his almost mythic presence. And I don't know that using the word almost is necessary. His mythic presence. You have Ule not in his room, and I use the word his loosely, not in the room that he basically co-opted, that he just assumed. He's not in the room, and then the camera pans back over, and he is in the room. What do you hear from his perspective? It's someone has come into the house and is speaking very familiar to the woman that he is calling Mudder, M-U-D-D-E-R, referring to this woman whose house he has just, again, using the word co-opted, using the word assumed. I'm tempted to use the word squatter. I'm tempted to use that word, squatting or squatter. He's really not a squatter because the person that owns the home still lives there. He just kind of co-opted part of the house, well, maybe the entire house, wherever he's at, that's his part of the house. He seems to remain in that bedroom for most of the time, unless, of course, he's in the bathtub washing off a bunch of dried blood. I digress. So the episode opens with Ule in that room, sitting in the chair, then overhearing this person who, by way of the noise, and again, I love the fact that it's faint, that you're part of this scene from Ule's perspective. You hear somebody come into the house and then immediately start talking. And I believe that if you turn it up, if you listen to it again, you can make out everything that this person is saying. Yes, I did rewind it. And yes, I did turn the volume up to make sure I could hear what was going on. I wanted to experience the scene from Ule's perspective. He comes downstairs. As the scene progresses, you realize this person is very likely this woman's son. The person who has barged into the house and has started making demands and speaking down to this woman is, in fact, the woman's son. And the woman's son, without missing a beat, demands of Ule money if he is staying at the house, if he is, as the son puts it, a boarder. I did like the fact that Ule scares the hell out of the son by coming up from behind, silently, of course, which again is part of the mythos of this Ule character and his supernatural existence. I love the way that character goes right into who he is, even though he's been startled, frightened by this strange presence, demanding that this person pay him if he's going to be a boarder at his mother's house, and Ule, having just come into substantial amounts of money. See episode 6, where Roy Tillman pays him for the failed kidnapping attempt of Dot. He's come into a bunch of money, and he tenders what looks like a wad full of money to this son, the son of this woman whose house he has just co-opted. And the son not only leaves happy, he leaves emboldened that this would be the amount of money that would need to be tendered to him every month. And then I love the fact that he just slyly, after he came to the house for what? What was his original intent? It was to get money from his mother. This guy's a deadbeat. He's going to get money from his mother, who he claims is spending too much money on alcohol. This is a woman who, by her own admission, is on a fixed income, says there's not much left over from the disability or the Social Security check at the end of the month after she's spent all the money on bills. He, of course, chastises her for spending so much money on alcohol. And once he gets that money from Ule, he slyly and yet sheepishly makes reference to the fact that he has something else that he needs to do, and it requires his immediate attention, and he's leaving. And he walks out the house. Last word guy gets last word. And yet it's not the last word. I felt it as soon as the camera panned outside, facing the door, facing the house, and you saw the son walking towards the camera. It struck me, oh, they're going to do a Fargo, not the television program, the movie. Ule is not going to allow that guy to walk away with all that money in the way that he did it, barging in and demanding of his mother and then getting the money and not even sharing some of it with her, keeping it all for himself. And before we know it, here comes the axe, and it is a complete and total homage to the end of Fargo, where Steve Buscemi ends up in the same posture, basically in that same posture, the posture of authority, of taking control. He's decided for two people how the money's going to be distributed. And then as he walks out, thinking that he's done, realizes that the other character has something else in mind, namely putting an axe into his chest. We do not see how the son is disposed of, whereas the Steve Buscemi character in Fargo the movie, of course, is put into a wood chipper. The show quickly transitions to Dot and her journey. After having left her daughter with the police officer, Nadira, she's still in the car and she's driving to parts unknown. We don't know where she's going. We know, though, that she hasn't slept in a while and that she's nodding off at the wheel. She stops at a truck stop. She parks. She goes in. She needs to get something to eat, and she orders pancakes. So in my mind at that point, we're getting back to what I'd call that Kafka-esque through line, that it's the Bisquick, it's the pancakes thing. A part of this entire season, who knows how it's going to play out here now in these last 3 episodes, but we get back to the pancakes. She orders pancakes. In the timeline of the episode, she presents as being refreshed, having eaten these pancakes, and she's back on the road. And in my mind, this next scene was another throwback to Fargo, the movie. She goes to some remote place out in the middle of nowhere where she retrieves from a box next to a windmill a postcard. Now, I did get this reflection of not only Steve Buscemi hiding the money in the movie out in the middle of nowhere and using what I believe was a snow scraper to mark where that money was hidden. If you recall, dear listener, and are familiar with the Fargo universe, in season 1 of Fargo the television show, the supermarket mogul finds that money. Of course, Buscemi is killed by his partner and placed into a wood chipper. It's one of those strange quirks in what you will call the Coen brothers universe. That money is completely unaccounted for. Given the way the story progressed and the fact that many of the principals are killed, no one really knows that there's this $1 million out there missing. So the supermarket mogul finds that money and is able to use it to build his empire, which is part of the storyline in season 1. I won't go into depth. I'm already 10 minutes in to this segment. Perhaps that's a bit of a stretch as an homage, but I did get that feeling. Dot going out in the middle of nowhere, identifying by memory some sort of artifact or some sort of arrow, a direction that she needs to go in. And at this point, you don't know who she's looking for or why. You go out to what is the middle of nowhere, at least according to the way I interpreted her driving out. She's going further and further out into the outstretches of either North Dakota or Minnesota to a place that's called Utopia. Strangely, she runs out of gas. And I say strangely because I thought it was curious that we have the scene where she's at the gas station. She's getting pancakes. She doesn't think to fuel up if she was in need of gas, at least by way of the sun still being out. That, yeah, it could be later on in the day, but if you needed any gas and you know you're going out in the middle of nowhere, you probably would have gotten it at the gas station. Well, the sun goes down quickly. Dot parades through the woods and finally finds signs of life, and she walks into what is a very disturbing puppet show that is being watched by a number of different women. And then we get into the crux of the episode. This is Dot's challenge to take what is Roy Tillman's first wife, who has founded this commune, that's what I'm going to call it, this commune for women who've been abused, and has developed this system that allows them to relinquish the identity of an abused woman and adopt a new identity, the identity that these women want to be. So it's this transformational commune. So while bizarre, it has this aura of holiness attached to it, and yet we find out that the person who founded the commune, the first wife of Roy Tillman, at least in the timeline that we are discovering this information, took in young Nadine, who was, by her own admission in her story, someone who had been abused at home by her loved ones, and the inference is sexually abused. Then she runs away. She is discovered by Nadine while shoplifting, and she is taken home to one Roy Tillman, who invites her as a father figure into the fold with sinister and violent consequences to come. So let's talk about the puppets. Let's talk about the fact that these women are using puppets as an avatar to communicate what they believe their truth is. And I state that purposefully because I wrote down numerous times that there is a concept being used by these women in this commune about her truth or your truth versus quote unquote the truth. And within that psychological framework, as Dot testifies to anyone that will listen to her when she first gets into this commune, I've already done what all of you women are attempting to do. I've already let go of my past, adopted a new me, and created a new life, one where I'm happy not only in my life, but I've married and I have a child, and I'm happy within that family dynamic. I am the woman that I've always wanted to be. It was interesting that they used the name of the founder of Roy Tillman's first wife, Linda, as their surrogate name until they came up with their own name. And I thought it was comedic when Dot was trying to get to Linda. She was trying to find Linda and kept asking about the Linda, not the Lindas that are these women who are trying to find their true identity, the first or the original Linda. Part of me thought that there might be violence that would ensue when Linda, Roy Tillman's first wife, refused to go with Dot in order to testify against Roy, though when Dot woke up in the middle of the night and adopted or took to this whole process of creating this puppet avatar in order to tell her story, in order to convey to this commune that she was, her truth was the truth, and that she needed Linda's help, it slowly started to dawn on me that this was going to be a unique way to tell a story of spousal abuse so that it can be both delicate in its retelling because of the gravity of it, the horror of it, the violence of it, and yet still capture some of the eeriness, is that the right word? Some of the more ominous features. The way that it is illustrated in this retelling by Dot's character, it has so much foreboding in it. So you realize what's coming before it does. And then even as it's being played out by puppets, there's still this horrific element to it. So I felt like, although highly peculiar, it was creative storytelling in order to address a subject that is quite infrequently addressed in television and in movies. The last program that I think so frankly or starkly tried to address domestic violence in such a realistic way, is that the best way that I could put that? Or in a way that is so believable. It's not heavy-handed. It's not clumsy. It would be Big Little Lies, the show that was on HBO. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of that show. In fact, the ending of that show was atrocious, which is the problem with most of the television programs, in my opinion, and that's the reason why I don't watch a lot of them, and I don't think most of them warrant me doing any kind of review or reflection about them. I didn't feel that show tied up the loose ends very well that it had built over the course of, I believe it was an 8 or 10 episode season on HBO. And so here we have the same type of subject matter being addressed, in my mind, in a much more thoughtful, in a much more thought-provoking way. And using the puppets allowed for an illustration of something that is dark and violent to be done so, at least in a way that is more easily digestible on a television program. Maybe that was for the censors. I don't know. You may have, as I did, dear listener, note at the end of every episode, you've got that domestic violence disclaimer and the hotline number. So it very well could be that showing such stark and ugly violence against a woman, even if it fits within the universe of the television program, within the paradigm between the characters, that doing so, illustrating it with puppets, was the best that could be done without getting some of it cut out. I don't know. It is a theory, and I think it's a pretty good theory, because if you had to do something in order to illustrate the point that you wanted to get across, you could do so using this very strange utopia commune. The woman who was the first wife, she had to basically find a surrogate for herself. She's got all of these women who are adopting a surrogate personality in this limbo that is the commune of utopia until they decide who they want to be. And they're using her name. And so there is this Freudian disclosure, this Freudian slip that this woman has done it before, and that the Nadine that she knew, who is now Dot, the Nadine was a substitute, a surrogate for her, so she could run away from Roy and not have him want to chase after her. I loved the scene when they're in the car. This would be Dot, or you could call her Nadine, and Linda. And Dot, and I'm going to call her Dot because she claimed that new self, that new version of herself in the commune. She asks Linda, why didn't you take us with you? Now, knowing who Roy Tillman is as a character, there's no way in hell that if she walked out on him, that being Linda, with these two young kids, that he was going to let that stand, that he wasn't going to pursue her and try to find her. So as soon as that question was asked, I felt it was going to be rhetorical, or that Dot was going to answer for herself. And the way it was shot was so interesting that you had Linda in the background and she never comes into frame. So Dot is always first or present in the frame of the camera, and you only see Linda out of focus, out of the frame. And she doesn't answer, and then Dot does rhetorically answer herself, simply stating, when you're ready to tell me, you'll tell me. And then we get what? We get the pancake drop, we get the plate hitting the table, and it's all a dream sequence. Me no likey dream sequences. I feel like it's a cheap trick to pull on your viewer, because you have such control over the narrative of that story, the storytelling. It's so easy to pull off a dream sequence at any given point because we don't have anywhere else to go. It's not like we're reading a book. We have to follow, and we don't have any other choice but to adopt now that the whole thing was a dream. Now, that leads me to a litany of other questions. So if she's driving out in the middle of nowhere, where was Dot going? What was her intended destination? She has this dream sequence, and now that you see it as a dream sequence, it could be everything that she wanted Linda to say and to be. Because here you have the woman who, if we're to take the dream sequence at face value, Linda left. She did so knowing that Dot being there would allow her to get away. Dot always has felt this resentment towards her because Linda knew what it was to be Roy Tillman's wife. She had no idea. She was underage as well. So she's created that whole dream sequence where Linda has at least done something worthwhile or worthy with her life, having abandoned Dot and her son the way that she did. Yet, can we take the dream sequence at face value? Is it possible that Linda is dead? Is it possible that Linda is still running, or that she has some sort of false identity that only one or two people may know of, and perhaps Dot is going to talk to those one or two people to see if she's ever popped her head up? There's still a mystery shrouding where Dot's going, or where her intended destination was, and who is this Linda character? Is she alive? Is she someone who would communicate with Dot in any capacity? Did this character, in fact, use Dot as a surrogate? Was that the intention all along when she identified Dot as a runaway who had been abused in her household? Did she identify this as someone that she could bring in to Tillman and then escape her own hell? I believe we're going to find that out, and right quick. Because we do have, instead of the Bisquick moment, the pancake moment, the Kafkaesque moment in this episode was the bizarre truck coming out of nowhere hitting the car and the car hitting Dot, which was quite well done. I'm going to take a quick aside. I thought the CGI of that was amazing. You hear the truck blowing the horn, and I don't know about you, dear listener, it took me a second to realize that was all a dream sequence, and then to come out of the coma that was, oh, that was a dream sequence. As a viewer, I was still wrestling with that, and then, lo and behold, a truck comes out of nowhere, hits a car, that car hits Dot. Slow play Dot in the hospital thinking that it's in fact Wayne who has come to get her, and Tillman is smart enough to realize to use Wayne's name to get through to her, which opens up an entire can of worms as far as questions. Roy Tillman is a known commodity in North Dakota and in Minnesota, right? Go back to Lorraine Lyon saying, "I've heard of you," when Tillman presents to get Dot, thinking that he's going to be able to negotiate with the mother-in-law, and she says, "I've heard of you." So he is a known quantity in North Dakota. He's a known quantity in parts of Minnesota. Where is Dot that he, Roy Tillman, could come into the hospital and identify himself as Wayne Lyon, and they would accept as much? One would think that that couldn't be in North Dakota, anywhere in North Dakota. And it's certainly in parts of Minnesota, he wouldn't be able to pull that off. He's a public figure running for public office. He's got a debate, I believe, if I'm correct in my timeline of the television program, he's got a debate the evening after he is presenting to the hospital to get Nadine or Dot. Could be a plot hole. Could be a plot twist. And although I said that I was going to go in order in the episode, I didn't do it. I just got so caught up in talking about the entire Utopia sequence. We've got to jump now to Ulay and Gator. We've got to discuss what is a very interesting ending to the scene where Ulay has rightly, he has correctly assumed that Gator's going to come for him. He's got that whole lure, if you will, where the son, who I thought, well, maybe he got chopped up, turns out he didn't get chopped up at all. He's sitting dead up in a rocking chair where Ule would normally reside. And Ule has got that rope on the rocking chair to simulate the movement, as in Ule is sitting in the rocking chair enjoying a nice evening nightcap. Gator shoots the cadaver. Gator goes to retrieve the tracking device, notices that the bag that his father had given to Ule with all of that money is sitting in the backseat of the car, and he, because he's there and because he wants to be the hero, he's going to retrieve all of that money. Recall, in the last episode, where Gator states to his father, we're already in the hole, we're already underwater. They may very well, in the universe of the show, need that money. We, the viewer, do not know the financial strife that they are actually under. It may be not only that Gator wants to be a hero, but he knows how badly that his father, whether it be the personal finances or his campaign finances, they need that money. He's going to retrieve it. He breaks the window of the automobile, and what happens? Strangely, the woman who owns the house presents and yells thief and begins to attack young Gator. Now, why do I say strangely? Ule killed her son. Granted, they may not have had a great relationship. It seems strange that not 12, 14, maybe 16 hours before, Ule had killed her son, and she's out grocery shopping, which means, of course, what? Buying case after case of beer. She presents and sees the murderer of her son's car being robbed, and her first thought is, I am going to assault this perpetrator. And in the scuffle, this older woman is knocked down and she is killed. The scuffle has caused a kerfuffle. Yeah, I did that on purpose. I'm not proud of it, and yet I'm not ashamed of it. The scuffle between the two has caused a kerfuffle. You hear the dogs barking. Now Gator is in trouble. Attention has been drawn. He's got to get out of there. And Ule comes down and identifies what? The woman is deceased. He had co-opted her house. He just planted himself there and took over. And I thought that he would be happy, that all of these ends would be tied up, and yet he was not happy. In fact, for a nihilist, he looked quite pissed off. And I actually wrote that down in my notes. Nihilist gets mad. Nihilist don't believe in anything. Now, Tillman pointed out you believe in money, and yes, he does. But does the nihilist believe in anything outside of money? Clearly, yes. Clearly, there's some sort of affinity between Ule and this woman, and the fact that she has now passed. I believe that all bets are off when it comes to his relationship not only with Gator, but with Roy Tillman. Now, do I believe the money is in the bag? No, I don't. Although it wouldn't surprise me if Ule left the money in the bag, because technically I don't think he cares about money as much as he cares about the principle that when someone makes a promise and there is consideration involved in that promise, that consideration is tendered if you keep your part of the bargain. I don't have any evidence for it. I believe that somehow these storylines, the way that they're being presented, are going to give Ule this opportunity for redemption. And that redemption may be in his passing, that because of what he did way back in the day, if we're to believe that that is the entirety of his storyline, that he was a sin eater back in the 1500s, and that by engaging in such conduct for money, he is now immortal, that his redemption may be somehow in taking action to redeem sin absent any consideration, absent any money. And that thereby, having done so, he'll be able to pass on to the next life. He'll be able to die. These segments run so long, I can continue talking for another 15, 20 minutes. I am going to make note of the relationship between Wayne and Wayne's daughter. It's clear that he's getting better, although he's not sharp. He is getting better. I thought the whole scene in the Kia dealership was hilarious. He has little to no business savvy in his current condition, and yet he's very insightful when he is reading this imaginary story to his daughter, and it appears that if he can imagine up a story using a narrative of Dot the mother being the protagonist and the hero and the savior, that he is regaining his faculties. The other note that I wanted to make, and this is a more controversial topic, and it may be one that I save for my season finale, the wrap-up that I want to do with my buddy JB, with Jason, the whole juxtaposition of what we're going through as a country right now and the whole left-right division that we have in politics and how that translates to what's going on in this season of Fargo, where you've got Roy Tillman, the libertarian sheriff. He uses a lot of what I would call conservative nomenclature, the libtards comments and things of that nature, that I find a bit polarizing. I'm not sure that it's necessary, although I think it's pulled off perfectly within the universe of the show. So I'm not saying that it's bad writing. I just don't know that it's necessary given how polarizing a character Roy Tillman is. Yes, we get it. There is a strong libertarian bend to him, but that libertarian bend, even his religious credo, it's very self-centered. It's very selfish. I'm not sure any television program, I'm not sure any movie, any social media outlet has put it together so succinctly that in many ways, some of your more extreme libertarians, they're just babies. They're fighting for their right to be a baby, right? They want all of the privileges without any of the responsibilities. I feel this characterization would be better served if there were more, or if we had seen more of an interaction between Roy and the militia, which I believe is forthcoming, but we get it in the first episode of the season, and we really haven't seen any of it through episode 7 of a 10-episode season. I don't throw them out very often because I'm rarely right. I believe that the savior here is going to be Lorraine Lyon. It's very likely that she's going to leverage Roy's financial situation to try to get Dot back. Now, whether or not that's the way Dot gets back to her family, that's the real question. Because as Tillman himself has said, she's not like a normal woman. She is a tiger, or more likely a tick. It's only suffocating. It's only burning. She is capable of getting away on her own. And then throw in another X factor. You have Ule, who's going to be front and center now that if there is this affinity, at least as I interpreted it at the end of this episode, episode 7, he is going to be hunting Gator and very likely Tillman himself. Did the dream sequence put me off? No, it didn't. Can't say it left a great taste on the palate. Did not put me off. I'm excited to do another reflection, and it will be the first episode of the new year of the new season, season 4. I wish you all a very safe and happy and prosperous new year. Welcome 2024. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.